Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing to look at the life of King Saul. And today we are going to see a little bit of, well, just a problem with him. And if you had gone through the life of Samuel with us here at the Broadman Word as well, this is going to be one that we touched on then, and we're going to touch on it again here. So go to 1 Samuel chapter 13. 1 Samuel chapter 13, we're going to look at basically the whole chapter today. But it really does have to do with impatience, just not being patient on what God has in store for us. Especially since we don't know the future. We don't know what's going to happen. We need to be patient on the God who does. And he will come through for us, maybe just not in the same amount of time that we expect or want. With that being said, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1. Saul lived for 1 year and then became king. And when he had reigned for 2 years over Israel, Saul chose 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the people he sent home, every man to his tent. Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistines that was at Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. And Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." And all Israel heard it, said that Saul had defeated the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become a stench to the Philistines. And the people were called out to join Saul at Gilgal. So you have this a little bit of a time reference here too. When it says that lived for 1 year and then became king, that probably just means it took a year for the between the anointing and then where he was really established as king. And then 2 years after he became king is where we find chapter 13. So, just for a timing standpoint, that's where we're at with that. The other interesting thing here, I think, is the fact that he has a son. He has a son with him who is also a mighty warrior. And Jonathan plays a big part in the life of David, of course, as well. But here you have the Philistines, which really become a thorn in the side of Israel, period. Not just King Saul, but David too. And you really get to see that kind of start here in chapter 13. And so you have all of this going on, and Saul is going to lead this sort of war against the Philistines, along with his son Jonathan. However, the Philistines are not too happy about the losses that they have suffered at the hands of Saul, Jonathan, and the Israelites, and so they come out in force. Verse 5. And the Philistines mustered to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen and troops like the sand on the seashore in multitude. They came up and encamped in Michmash to the east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, the people hid themselves in caves and in holes and in rocks and in tombs and in cisterns, and some Hebrews crossed the fords of the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul was still at Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Now, the parenthetical reference in verse 6 for the people who were hard pressed, that's not really solidified here what that means. That's actually going to be solidified in, here in the first part of chapter 13. But at the end of chapter 13, we are going to look at how they are hard pressed, which then sets up chapter 14. So we will take a look at that in just a second. But war is here. The Israelites are scared. They have run really just hidden themselves away. And Saul is understandably looking for some sort of advice, and he wants to turn to Samuel. And so, verse 8. He waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, "Bring the burnt offering here to me, and the peace offerings." And he offered the burnt offering. So if you remember when Samuel was talking to Saul in chapters previously that we looked at, he even mentioned this thing that was going to happen. He said, "Look, wait 7 days at Gilgal for my arrival." Well, 7 days have passed. Now, we'll get to a second what that means, but 7 days have passed in some shape or form, and so Saul is concerned, which makes sense. That concern for his people, and most likely himself, and his son, is really sinking in, and he feels like he is at the end of his wits and he doesn't know what to do. And so he decides to become Samuel, or step into the role of Samuel, even though he was not called to that and he was supposed to wait on Samuel. But let's see exactly what happens when Samuel arrives, because he does. Verse 10. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and greet him. Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, Now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." Now, looking for advice of the Lord is not bad. Actually, we would rather have Saul and, well, a lot of the kings of Israel in the Old Testament do this. That's not the issue. The issue is not being patient for the coming of Samuel, but really not being patient on the Lord. That's the thing that's at issue here. And specifically the fact that Samuel gave him very clear instructions. Now, you could say, according to verse 8, he waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal. So you could look at this and say, look, he did what he was supposed to do. Yes, I see where you're getting at. The problem is the quickness that Samuel arrives after the offering. And my point is this. Most likely when we say waited 7 days, it's probably 7 days in hours, but not an actual 7 full days. Now, is this really explicit here? Not exactly. However, the speed that Samuel comes to Saul at the right moment after he is done making the offering, as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering in verse 10. Well, burnt offerings don't take very long. They're very, very quick. They are meant to be very quick, first off. And so that to me is saying that Saul on the seventh day is getting antsy. And so he doesn't wait for that seventh day to conclude. Now, he may have gone to the seventh day and he may have gone into that seventh day, but he does not wait for the whole day to finish. I would say that's probably what's going on here. Now, if, let's say, he has waited 7 full days and Samuel shows up at the very beginning of the morning on the 8th day, first off, I think it would probably mention that, but since it doesn't, could that have happened? It could have. But it doesn't mean that Saul shouldn't have practiced patience, and so he does not. He becomes impatient. Now, don't get me wrong. If I was in Saul's shoes, I would be a little bit concerned as well after waiting 7 days. But I think that's probably what's going on here, is that it's still the seventh day. It's just into the seventh day. With how quickly Samuel shows up after the offering is done. So, with this being said, though, Samuel is about to give Saul a very blunt message. Verse 13. And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." And Samuel arose and went up from Gilgal. The rest of the people went up after Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin. So you have Samuel just give this message like, look, your time's already done. Your time as king is already done. Now, some have looked at this and rightfully seen this as, rightfully as in our view of it, could have seen this as, wow, this is harsh. I mean, it seems like the guy messed up one time and he's done. Well, the problem is that, of course, the one who's calling the shots here is God. And God knows exactly what Saul is going to do from this point on for the rest of his kingship. So the Lord, knowing what is going to happen with Saul, what he will do and what he will say in the future, he knows that Saul is not the guy. Yes, he put him in charge, but he put him in charge to show Israel the mistake that they made in pushing God out as their king. And so he wants to show them the mistake that they made with Saul, but now he wants to show them the grace that God can have on you by bringing about a man after God's own heart, which, of course, is King David. It doesn't mean he's perfect, but he follows the Lord a lot more than King Saul did. So I think that is why on the surface, it may make you go, wow, he messed up one time, he's done. Well, in hindsight, we have all the info and everything that Saul did. Well, so did the Lord, obviously. And so I think that's why he is being already booted out. But he's not booted out in a sense where he's done. Saul reigns for about 40 years. I mean, it's not like he has reigned 2 years in at the start of this section in verse 1 in chapter 13. It's not like he reigns 2 years, gets this message from Samuel, and gets maybe 1 or 2 more years, and then he's done. No, he gets 38 something more years. And that's a huge, that's grace in itself. God could have easily put in David immediately, but he allows Saul to continue to reign. But with that, there's a couple of other things I wanted to look at here with the end of the chapter. So continuing in verse 15, and Saul numbered the people who were present with him, about 600 men, which is a very small amount for an army. And Saul and Jonathan his son and the people who were present with them stayed in Gibeah, Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Michmash. And raiders came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. One company turned toward Ophrah, to the land of Shual. Another company turned toward Beth-horon, and another company turned toward the border that looks down on the valley of Zeboim, toward the wilderness. Now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel. This is where I think the hard-pressed parenthetical reference from earlier in verse 6, I believe it was, Yes, in verse 6, that's where I think this comes into play in verse 19. For the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make themselves swords or spears. But every one of the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen his plowshare, his mattock, his axe, or his sickle, and the charge was 2/3 of a shekel for the plowshares and for the mattocks, and 1/3 of a shekel for sharpening the axes and for setting the goads. So on the day of the battle, there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people with Saul and Jonathan. But Saul and Jonathan his son had them, and the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. So that sets up chapter 14, but also gives you a little bit of glimpse why Saul was very, very concerned, but why he also did what he did out of impatience as well, by offering the offering when he shouldn't have. But here, it's, yeah, I mean, you have this army of 600, but only two people have swords, one for King Saul and one for his son Jonathan. The last thing I want to point out, too, is the fact that Saul is not named King Saul here. And really, that is a kind of a pattern throughout his life. At the beginning, okay, maybe we think, oh, well, he's coming to his own, so he's got to deserve it. The rest of the book, though, it's not really like that. And I think the reason why is because it's showing that Saul is not really a very good role model for the first king of Israel, and he really doesn't do a very good job at it either. So I think that is kind of where we're going with the reason why in this chapter he's named Saul instead of King Saul. So with that being said, though, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today. We'll see more issues come up in the life of Saul next time or next week as we get into 1 Samuel chapter 14. But thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today. I will see you next week. Thanks.